The Monster Hunter community is very often regarded as a very positive one. Generally, our community of hunters is very welcoming, and in fact, a lot of us try to get as many people into Monster Hunter as possible, sometimes to an extreme degree. However, I've noticed that throughout the years, there is a small subsection of the community that can be potentially considered toxic. Of course, these behaviors practiced by a very small minority of the community do not reflect the overall perception of the community as a whole. But as someone that has been playing Monster Hunter since the PSP days, but also as a Monster Hunter content creator over the last few years, I simply cannot deny that there is some toxicity in the Monster Hunter community, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Lately, things have been ramping up, and there has been some tension in the Monster Hunter community, and now it seems that players are being kicked from online sessions in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak for no other reason than having purchased the Lost Code DLC layered weapons. There was already quite a controversy, especially on Twitter, about the DLC layered weapons. A lot of people are upset about this. Some are more so concerned about what it implies about the future of Monster Hunter, and if the future weapons that we end up getting in the games are not going to be treated with as much care and as much detail as the DLC paid weapons. That is a valid concern in my opinion, because after all, we didn't really get any paid DLC until Monster Hunter World, where there was a couple of layered armors, but then everything exploded with Iceborne and Monster Hunter Rise, so a good portion of the community is very skeptical about this slippery slope. There is a lot to say about this topic. It is a very nuanced topic that deserves its own video, and of course I do not condone anyone doing this, kicking players out of their session just because they are using paid DLC. It's purely cosmetic, it doesn't affect the game in any way, and even if it did, the fault of it existing is on the developers and not on the players that have chosen to purchase them. Now, this practice is of course meant to essentially just punish the players that have bought the DLC and essentially make it so that they have a worse experience playing their game. This is very reminiscent of something that happened a lot in World of Warcraft, where players would use the /spit emote on other players that have purchased cosmetics, especially mounts, that were exclusive to the store. This became such a big problem that at some point, Blizzard ended up essentially changing the way the emote worked, so you would no longer spit on players and you would just spit on the floor. Again, it is understandable that you might not want paid DLC layered weapons and armors. It is completely understandable, but this is something that should not happen at all. This post in specific goes on to say that the player was kicked from 12 different sessions just because they had the Lost Code layered weapons, which is absolutely insane. Now, I personally don't play online a lot in Monster Hunter. I feel like the game is already very easy as it is, so going online the game ends up being too easy, barely feels like I'm playing against a monster and more like a training dummy, and sometimes it ends up being a bit of a mess with 4 different players, each of them having their Silkbind attacks and also their Palamutes. I'm not that much into that, but I know that some players love the cooperative experience of Monster Hunter, and it is very sad to see that this is happening in the Monster Hunter community. And just because you're kicking a player that has bought the DLC layered weapons or armors, it doesn't really change the fact that the developers are probably going to add even more of that to the store. It is simply inevitable at this point, the trajectory is already set, and I'm sure that by the end of Sunbreak we're going to have like 3 different sets of layered weapons, at the very least, to purchase from the store. And I also get why people aren't upset or don't think it's a big deal, because after all, Monster Hunter is such a great franchise and we're always getting these free title updates, we're getting new events and new extra content, we just got 3 new monsters added to the game, and the endgame of Sunbreak keeps getting expanded upon, which is all great and nice, but I have to say, if your reasoning for buying these DLC weapons is because you want to support the developers, I'm sorry, but the money is not going to the developers. That is just not happening. But I'm also not going to sit here and criticize anyone for buying them, because, well, they just look amazing. They have these special glow effects that no other weapon in the game has, and well, that's why they are being sold at a premium. I don't think we're going to be getting a battle pass or pay-to-win weapons in Monster Hunter, in Sunbreak, or in future titles. I don't think it's going to get to that point, but it is certainly alarming that this is the direction that we're going with Monster Hunter. But if it stays that way, then I can graciously accept, if you will, and I might even purchase maybe an item or two. I haven't bought anything in Monster Hunter Rise or Sunbreak, but I did buy a couple of room decorations back in Monster Hunter World. I don't typically buy anything from the DLC store, especially since I play on PC and I have access to mods, but that ends up being a different conversation, because obviously I'm going out of my way to add stuff that isn't intended by developers. But going back to the toxicity in the community, yeah, especially as a content creator, I get to observe just how so many people feel about the game and the direction it's going, how they feel about the updates and everything. And it's clear that there has been a rise in negative perception about the Monster Hunter franchise in the recent years. Some people say this started with World or Iceborne. I'm not quite sure. Of course, we got a huge influx of new players with Monster Hunter World, so that could be the center of it all. But of course, we're talking about having a community with over 20 million players. Monster Hunter is no longer the niche it was, it is now pretty much a mainstream title. So again, as I said at the beginning of the video, I want to emphasize that this very vocal but yet very small minority does not represent the community at large. Thankfully, I keep getting nothing but praise and very helpful comments. People are so nice in the community to me ever since I started making videos on Monster Hunter World, and I was very scared going into making videos about Monster Hunter World because despite me playing Monster Hunter for a very long time, I was never a hardcore hunter, so I was very scared of getting anything wrong. But whenever I got something wrong, the community would always be helpful in correcting me, but in a very positive way, which I found was very helpful and very encouraging to keep me making content for the game, content that people enjoyed. I've also seen some other videos on YouTube, other creators talking about the community being toxic. Personally, I haven't experienced this as much, but I do want to point out this video made by a Brazilian Monster Hunter creator. I think the video is very good, so if you do speak Portuguese or Brazilian, I do recommend that you check it out because he talks about a lot of nuanced topics and how the community perceives the game, and sometimes the online experience when you join these random lobbies can certainly be less than welcoming. For example, players criticizing your mixed sets, talking about why you're not dealing a lot of damage, why are you using that weapon, why aren't you pulling your own weight, that kind of stuff. Some of you guys might remember, but Gaijin Hunter back in the day used to say a lot that he was kicked from a ton of lobbies in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate because he loved to play as a brawler, even despite he himself, more often than not, dealing a lot more damage than the other players that were using regular weapons. Even despite that, he would get kicked out of lobbies all the time. So it looks like when you go into these random open lobbies, there is a chance that you will be met with negative criticism and even some toxicity. There's also those stickers and shoutouts that people use in the middle of a hunt to negatively criticize other players, talking about them being bad, or they say a slur whenever someone dies in an online hunt. Again, I don't play a lot of online, I really don't. I play mostly solo, so I don't really get to experience this a lot, but I get a lot of reports about this on Discord and also in my comment section. So please tell me if you have experienced this in the past. The takeaway here is that, yeah, there is some negativity in the community, but despite that, it is still a very, very positive community, by far the most positive community that I was ever a part of. So despite all of this drama, kicking the players and criticizing builds and whatnot, all I have to say is just have fun. It's not a serious game, there is no PvP, there is no competition, there is no ranked ladder. Just have fun with the game and share your passion for Monster Hunter with as many people as possible. If you don't like something about the game, Capcom often releases various different surveys to the community so you can fill them out and tell them what it is that you would like to see changed in the game. At this point, Monster Hunter 6 is probably midway through development, so if you really dislike layered weapons being paid DLC, then make sure that you fill out those surveys and send them to Capcom, so that maybe they won't be a thing in the next Monster Hunter game. I want to say thank you to Rurikan for bringing attention to this topic. I wasn't aware that people were being kicked out of lobbies because of this. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know there was a Monster Hunter Rage subreddit. There might be some funny posts on that subreddit, so I will browse it and see if there's something to be made there. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching. My name is Dark Hero, and as always, happy hunting.